There's no better time than summertime for Tiki. It's a sometimes vlog. Yeah. I feel like that was ridiculously loud because it's so quiet out here in the Randomland jungle at this moment. It's a vlog that happens sometimes. Welcome to my backyard. Welcome to summertime, where it's roasting already, even at 9 or 10 o'clock, whatever time it is in the morning. Things are cooking up, heating up, getting exciting out here in Southern California, and they're getting doubly, triply, quadruply exciting in my backyard because look at this. Now let me explain this to you really quick. These things that you're looking at right here, these little tiki masks, and pardon me, but I'm gonna pick you up and give you a closer look. These are the representation of more than a year's worth of work, and I wanna show them to you, and I wanna talk to you about them. But first, I've gotta tell you about something completely different. Because, my friends, because I have achieved something that has been on my bucket list. Now, when most people say their bucket list, what they usually mean is a list of things they would like to do, or things they've always kind of thought, yeah, that might be neat to do. They don't literally mean like, that has been a goal of mine. I have to do that before I die. It's been a mission. I've been on a mission to do that no matter what. Well, I'm trying to do the math, 21 or 22 years ago, 21 or 20, it was either 2001 or 2002. So we're talking 21, 22 years ago. I was in this band that was trying to do a fundraiser, right? And they're trying to do like a luau themed fundraiser. I thought, perfect, you know where to go? We'll go to Oceanic Arts, we'll rent some tikis or whatever. We didn't have a very big budget. I thought, you know what we can do to save some money? I'd already been in there and I'd already been snooping around the tikis, looking around the tikis. You know what we can do to save some money is we could just make our own tiki. I mean, how hard could it be? These things are made out of wood. We can get some wood. And so we used to practice up at this big blue house in Whittier, right across the street, sort of from Rose Hills. If you're going up the 605, if you've ever been in Southern California, going up the 605 freeway up through Whittier, and you're past that Beverly Boulevard exit, and you get next to the cemetery. So there's this big blue Victorian house, and we actually used to practice in that house. We used to know the family who lived there and practice in that house. And right across the street was the cemetery, and right next door, I'm trying to adjust you there, right next door was like a wood yard, like a firewood yard, and they would take all this wood, landscaping wood, and chop it up into little pieces. So I went in there and I said, I'd like a log, you know, I want to carve a tiki, so I just need a big log. And the guy's like, oh, I don't know what kind of wood you use for that, you know? So he's like, well, we just cut down this giant eucalyptus tree. So he gives me this big eucalyptus log, green. I mean, it's just freshly cut down maybe the day before. And because they chop the firewood and then they dry and age and stack the firewood. They don't keep logs out there to dry or anything. This place, it's a firewood place. And anyway, so I take this green log and I take it to my friend Monkey's house. Maybe someday I'll do another video about this. So I apologize if you ever have to hear this story again in the future. But if I ever go over to that house, I'll definitely tell this story again. And we start carving this tiki. It's a flat chisel and a hammer, like a ting metal hammer, you know, like a Home Depot, just a normal hammer, not a mallet. We have no idea what I'm doing. I'm trying to chop out this log, and this is the worst wood ever. It is not working. It's just like, no, just little pieces coming out. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're out there sweating. And then my friend who's like really good with tools, this guy David, he's like, let me give it a try, whatever. Anyway, halfway through carving the tiki, halfway through carving the tiki, there was no halfway. Halfway through us attempting to carve this tiki, my friend Monkey's mom flipped out. She lost her mind. Just for some reason, she knew what we were doing. She saw us get the rental props. That was all fine. But halfway through watching us carve it, I don't know exactly how to tell this story, but anyway, I'll figure out how to tell it in more detail later, but she lost her mind, and she was like, you're carving a demon, you're carving a 30-foot demon of anger, and we were like, what? And she was like, get it out, get it off my property. She was freaking out, losing her mind, like, it's alive, it's coming to life, it's a demon. Like, huh? So anyway, so we were like, okay. And then the lady next door, Nancy, this very nice lady, shout out to Nancy, let us just move it into her backyard. But for some reason, Monkey's mom like kind of lost. She would lose her mind on occasion. She's a nice lady. She was a friend of mine. She's still a friend of mine, but she would occasionally lose her mind back in those days, if you know what I mean. And she would just stand over the fence like, you're carving you know, anyway, this whole thing, not even knowing that, you know, say Leroy was a very devout religious man, a man of faith, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so that, skipping aside the whole theological implications of carving a tiki, she was not happy about this tiki, and we had to move it over. She wasn't opposed to it at first, just halfway through. Anyway, that was my first attempt to carve a tiki, and it did not work. And then when the log started to dry out the next day, I don't know if it's the nature of eucalyptus or what, it was freaking impossible. Fast forward more than 20 years later, and I have finally done something I've been thinking about for 20 years and trying to do for 20 years, and talking to people about where to get wood, where to get logs, because I have never let that day go. I've never let my failed attempt to carve a tiki go. And 20 years later, and a run on at the mouth story later, I have done this. I have finally carved my first ever, like, giant, full-size, tiki-sized tiki statue. Now, he doesn't have a name yet or anything. I was trying to think of kind of like a hybrid name for him between Bob and Leroy's, you know, like Bob Rowe or Lee Bob Rowe, and then I was like, well, that's a little bit silly. I don't know if we need to go silly with it. But I carved this out of a palm tree log, and believe me, it is heavy. And yes, I have dropped it on stuff and broken that stuff. Not my foot yet, hopefully never. But I carved this freaking tiki. Now, I carved a couple of little tikis. I showed you guys them, I think in a Randomland episode or something like that. Some little palm logs. They weren't very good logs. They were kind of falling apart pieces of log. This is the only good solid log I had, and I gave it a go on the little grassy logs. One of them's back in the bushes behind me. It was not happening. I couldn't do it. I'll show you actually really quick. And I don't have much time because I don't have much battery or anything today. I'm just doing this impromptu. I didn't have time to build this vlog to scale or to paint it. I'm flying by the seat of my pants, but see, like this guy here, I couldn't finish him, stuck him in the bushes. And I had one big good log, and I figured, you know what? If I'm gonna give this a try and really see if I can do it, I need to go for a big log. So it's not perfect. It's not a master's museum piece here, but what it is a hybrid between, and it might not look like a tiki you're familiar with. You might be thinking of, you know, Ku or some actual Hawaiian god. I wouldn't carve that, first of all. And second of all, so like something like that, or something like that. Or you might be familiar with like Marquesan tikis, or some of these, you know, kind of off-the-shelf type of tikis that you can get. And you might be thinking, well, your tiki looks a little different. Doesn't look like the guy with the big teeth. Doesn't look like one of the ones with the cigar in the mouth or anything like that. It's a little bit of a different design. Instead of carving something that's more common, I decided to go for something a little bit weird. It's a hybrid between two of Leroy Schmaltz's tikis that were in Oceanic Arts, and they were much thicker, rounder logs. So he looks a little bit elongated here. But it's a hybrid between two designs because, hey, if you're gonna try and do something, you know, you're gonna try to be a painter or an artist, you gotta start by going to the museum and sketching the works of Michelangelo. You know, you gotta try to look at the works of the master. So as I'm doing it, I'm figuring out kind of how he did it, right? And I could see now like ways that his were better, and I looked at those tikis for hours. So I had them burned in my mind. And one crazy thing is there's lots of references and pictures. People take pictures like crazy of the front of tikis. I had all these pictures of the front of it from all the years I had gone to Oceanic Arts, and no pictures of the back. So the back is all guesswork. Also didn't cut all the way through the legs because I was like, nah, I did the legs differently. Didn't cut all the way through them. So anyway, I took some liberties with the designs. I made it, you know, somewhat my own, but the paint definitely came straight from a hybrid of two Leroy tikis and the idea. And so I did it. I literally can't even believe that I did it. I keep coming out here and looking at this thing like, yeah. Now I don't have any more big logs, and I don't know how many more tikis like this I'll ever carve in my life. It took 2 weeks of work, me chipping away at this thing almost all the time. And I had to borrow a chainsaw from my buddy Spike, which was a whole thing in and of itself. Is that my entire life I've always been terrified of chainsaws. Like, chainsaws are one, I don't know how tall I can stand up in here, so I'm just gonna squat next to the tiki. I've been terrified of chainsaws my entire life. Never wanted to use them. So you can imagine me out here like in my sandals using a chainsaw. A really dull, old, tiny chainsaw, electric, you know, as safe as I could be other than not wearing chaps or anything. So I got a lot of splinters in the legs and all that kind of stuff. Got a chisel in the arm the other day. But there you go. I carved a tiki. I can't believe I did it. I still can't even think. I'm just like, oh yeah, there's a tiki in my backyard. And I never had a signature Randomland Tiki, one that was unique right here. That wasn't like a store-bought one. I never had a tiki in the Randomland Tiki jungle, so I kind of literally for like 4 or 5 years, or no, more than that, almost 10 years now, I've been thinking, oh, we should bring back like a little tiki time or Tiki Tuesday time or whatever. But I always in the back of my head was like, wait till I have a tiki garden. Then I got the tiki garden. Then I was like, wait till you have a good Randomland mascot, our signature Randomland Tiki, and now we've got him. I've just got to figure out that name. I've just got to figure out a little nickname for him that's not, you know, totally disrespectful, but just a little tribute to good old Oceanic Arts or Bob and Leroy or Whittier or somehow I gotta figure that out, because I gotta go to Oceanic Arts today. They've been open on Thursdays just to clear out the warehouse. So that is where I got this, which is an old stool of Leroy Schmaltz's. There's all his schmaltz on there, his paint that he broke the back off of. And I used to see him lean his knee on this while he would router and chisel and all that stuff. Okay, so I want to tell you more about this. But I run out at the. I went to go to the antique store with you on the last one, and I thought that was going to be a 5-minute talk, and it ended up being like 50 minutes. So I gotta actually move on. Oh, and the glaze here, you know, the nice glaze to sort of age and dull the paint, which I also did on the masks. If I forget to talk about that, shout out to Chris for giving me some of Leroy's secrets. Pretty crazy. And here is a whole other thing. So now I want to say that this is bucket list for me too, and it was to learn how to carve tiki masks like the kind that you would get at Oceanic Arts. You see, they're flat. Well, they're still like 2 inches thick in the thickest part, so they're pretty meaty, but they are the flat kind of things you can put on the gates of Adventureland, those kind of things. And at Oceanic Arts, they had these guys. When they would get them in stock, they would stack them, you know, their masks up really high, and you'd go digging through them, and all the paint. So you notice these two guys, all the paint was always slightly different, because, you know, Leroy would get bored, for one, and he's an artist, and he would always do the paint slightly differently on each mask. And so in the spirit of that, when Oceanic Arts was closing, I'm like, dang, I can't get any more masks. And I'd already been trying to carve some of my own and all that. And they were telling me how to get copies made down there. And Leroy was talking to me about how I can go ahead and get copies. But when you get copies carved, you still essentially have to do a lot of carving on it to actually finish it and get it back to the same. It's just kind of roughed down. He was explaining the whole process to me. And 1.5 years later, here I am. None of these are the original carving. I did the original carving of this guy first, which is way too close to an Oceanic Arts design, but one that I haven't produced in years and years and years and years and years, but it would sometimes appear on like art. And I don't know if they've even made that since maybe the middle 90s. A long time anyways. And I never ever saw one for sale in there. Just the sample one up on the wall always intrigued me. And he ended up on like mugs and stuff like that. And so I wasn't trying to do an exact copy, but I got pretty darn close. It is a little different. It's actually a lot different. But I would say to the average person just looking at the two, they go, looks pretty close. But it's not a copy. I carved an original one, took it down, showed it to Leroy. He's like, yeah, pretty good. Or no, Bob says, that's pretty good. I'd hire you as an apprentice chiseler. And Leroy, and I showed him, just went, it's a tiki, you know, just that little, it's a tiki. And if you knew Leroy, there's a bug on my guy here, then you knew that was like high praise coming from Leroy. It's a tiki. Like that was like thumbs up. And he's the one who would give me all the advice I would ever need, not quite, to do this. He'd just say, cut away everything that's not the tiki, and laugh, and then say that again the next time I asked him a specific. He would tell me specific answers to specific questions. But you're like, how do you do this and this and this? And what do you do? And cut the outside with the jigsaw? You just cut away everything that's not tiki. It doesn't matter what you use. Okay. So, so there you have it. So that was like one of the first ones I learned to do. This is like my first sort of attempt at an original design, obviously inspired by other stuff. When it comes to tiki, if you're just completely making it out of the blue, or anything tiki or oceanic or anything, then you're kind of just drawing cartoons of just whatever. You know, things have to be kind of grounded in a historical reality, either of the kind of mid-century tiki or in the actual oceanic art, which I'm a huge fan of, like from the South Seas, South Pacific, Papuan art and all that kind of stuff. And so I have, you know, a lot of time, hours invested looking at that kind of stuff, but also looking at Leroy's. And I was like, I'm gonna try and do one of Leroy's 3D tikis in a 2D, like a similar one to that. And so this is my first quote unquote original. You know, wasn't looking at a photo of an older design or anything like that. And so anyway, we sent them to the copying process. I sent this one because I just had these two. These are the first two that I did. And I have carved more masks and more designs for the future. And we got these copies made. So these are really prototypes. And I don't know that I'll make these much more. I got to talk to the Oceanic Arts guys and make sure, you know, everybody's cool with that. But I've just made a few just to see the process and carve the process. And this is, okay, you know, work on these designs, work on the glazing and the aging and all that kind of stuff. So these all have the secret sauce on them so that they're not all shiny brown with the brand new paint and they look kind of older and stuff. And I have to tell you what was cool about this is I always wanted to do this. And I, you know, there's no way you get your money back out of this, not these four. But these four are for sale. I've actually sold already this guy and this guy. These guys are sold. These guys are still for sale for $300. I don't know if they'll still be for sale by the time you see this because I only put them on Instagram because they're only four and I knew they would go, which is not anywhere near investment recoup. And I have to pay someone to do the rough out copying and then I go in and finish them, which takes almost as long as carving them from scratch, but at least they look like copies. And that was the thing. I did not know this was a bucket list goal of mine. So I don't want to really use that expression for this. But once I got them all carved like this, because that was my favorite part of Oceanic Arts, I'm not going to lie to you, I got pretty, you'll notice I'm not turning the camera towards the house. That's because I don't even want to show you the mess that's going on back there with the Midsummer Scream stuff. That's a whole separate, we'll talk about that in a whole separate conversation. That's too crazy. I can't even, I hate waking up and seeing that. But it'll be over soon. It'll be over soon. Anyway, my favorite part of going there was seeing like the masks stacked up. Wait, these two aren't sold. So you would see things like, you would go on the shelves. They'd be on the shelves and you'd kind of just see like the feet sticking out, right? And you'd go and you'd be like, oh, they got some, and they imagine it was the same design over and over. And you'd go and you'd be like picking them up, trying to see the paint and sliding them out, and they're wood, right? So they're heavy, and you're like, some of them were heavier than others. Some of them were like mahogany or whatever the heck. You're pulling them out, you're looking at them like, oh, this one's like just finished wood, no paint. This one's got this. Oh, but this one's got this. Which one do I get? And when I finished all four of these last night, finally did like the paint detail and whatever on them, and I had them in my garage, I got like a little misty-eyed. First of all, it was always a dream for years, before I even ever had the courage to talk to Bob and Leroy. I'd go there and I would go to Adventureland and see those masks, and I always wanted to be able to make something like that. My great-grandpa was a wood carver. He carved ducks. I got some cats, like a wooden cat that he carved. He carved like carousel horses and different stuff. And he was really good at it. He carved all this miniature stuff, and I would ask him to teach me. He's like, I'd only get to see him up in his house, in his workshop, like a few hours a year, you know. They would come down usually, we wouldn't go up. And so he was like, I don't know how I can teach you. It's sort of one of those things you just have to do. And he was right. That's kind of why Leroy always gave those funny answers for his advice. Just cut away everything that's not the tiki. It's kind of something you just have to give it a try. I always thought, and I always used to say, and I still will say this because it's funny, and I came up with it, I think, that I can't make anything but a mess. But it turns out I was wrong about myself. I can make more than a mess, and thanks to a buddy who wished to remain anonymous so he doesn't get swamped, because he's already busy with his own stuff, I have figured out a way to very small scale make these things, not even cost effectively. Maybe one day I'll make more if the demand is high. So we can take pre-orders, and we will in a few weeks. You got to follow on Instagram, do the little favorite thing or whatever so you actually see what I post. But if you follow along there, I'll post something about doing a pre-order of maybe like 4 of each. I mean, and they're going to take 6 to 8 weeks to get. So that's how long the process might be. Now, we could get them done in 2 weeks, we could get them done in 4 weeks. It just all completely depends. And since you know, everybody's doing other stuff, we have to give ourselves a huge margin of time. But we'll maybe do 4 more of each pattern, maybe, unless, you know, one of them turns out to be more popular than the other. This one I'll probably keep making maybe for years if it goes well. This one I will probably not. It just completely depends. I got to talk to Bob and make sure everybody's like, hey, I know that's way too close. You know what I mean? I want to get everyone. The prototypes I don't feel bad about selling, and I think we did. There are a few more of these that are going to be made. That's why maybe the pre-orders, like they might be already roughed out by now before we send the other designs that I carved that are completely original that I don't want to show you because I don't want to spoil it. But I got to tell you, this is the point I was trying to make, is that I never believed I could do anything like this, much less something like this. This is even a bigger deal. I'm just more excited about those because I just did those, and since 2 of them just sold, I got to deliver them, and I'm in a rush to film them before they're gone forever. But I couldn't believe I did. I still can't wrap my head around this. I keep looking at this out in the backyard and being like, that's cool. I almost feel like I bought it from somewhere. Do you know what I mean? It didn't even look right, too. I was carving and carving. I'm like, it doesn't look like a tiki. It doesn't look like the kind of Leroy tiki I was going for. And by the way, his were black. He painted his black until I painted it. And then I went, oh, it looks just like a real tiki now. And then I realized that Leroy, a lot of his old tikis, he would paint them. Well, a lot of tiki guys, really good carvers, like Vic's Art and all those guys will do like really natural wood finish or whatever. Some guys paint them like Tiki Tony or Gecko or whatever, and they make these really cool things. They paint them all bright. There's so many talented tiki carvers and people still doing it now, and way better than anything I could ever do. But I just wanted one awesome Randomland jungle tiki. So where out in the Randomland jungle he goes, I don't know. Maybe I leave him right there just to face the rising sun, or where do I put him? I don't know where to put him out here. And that gives me so much more motivation to actually clean this jungle up. Oh, I wish I could keep these guys because they're so cool. I wanted to not sell them. I wanted to literally just have them stacked on like industrial shelves in the garage so that I could just recreate a little shelf of Oceanic Arts and feel like I was in there shopping, because that was my I kid you not. Other than watching Leroy, if he happened to be working on something tiki related and not just carving like Trader Joe's signs or something like that, my favorite thing to do down there, other than gab with Bob and Leroy and look at their old artifacts from their big trip, was to go and just look at all the masks and look at the way Leroy would do the same design over and over, but change up the paint. So notice even this one, in that kind of a spirit, I've taken that as inspiration, and I don't want to ever do them exactly the same as each other, you know, ever. So I'm trying to variate them a little bit, you know. I took the outline, I traced it on something, and then I doodled all over it to find the right thing. I was pulling out art books of South Seas art and trying to get inspired, like, you know, and I can't believe it happened. Now, I'm not a big tiki guy. I'm not going to change my name to Tiki Justin and open a hut somewhere and start going crazy with these. But, and like I always say, I'm not a fine artist, and there are many of these tiki guys who are like fine artists. Like, their work belongs in museums. It's underappreciated because it's a niche kind of historical thing, this piece of history from 70, 80, 90 years ago, almost 100 years ago now, when all that kind of tiki stuff started to appear, tiki bars, and then the post-war years. And it's almost like a historical reenactment. It's like being part of a historical reenactment scene in a way. Like, it's like a niche thing with that. But then there's a lot of us who really appreciate like the origins of all that kind of stuff, and a lot of people like Sven Kirsten and different people have gone a long way towards like pointing out the origin of the stuff, and knowing Leroy obviously and Bob, they were always telling me, well, this is from this, and this takes inspiration from this. We went to this island and talked to these carvers, and we learned this from them, and we taught them how to do this, and so there's a weird cultural exchange going on. Like I said, there's people like Gecko, if you have never heard of him. I think it's Gecko South Seas Art. He's in Hawaii, and he's making some great stuff. Tiki Tony, you got Vic's Art over there. I think I'm following him on Instagram. I think it's just Vic's Art, but I can't remember how to do it. I'll put it in the description if I can remember some of these guys, and you can see there are people carving fantastic stuff and cranking out way more stuff than I will ever crank out. So this is not fine art from me. This is folk art for me, and I do this stuff because it's really fun to do. So not making the money back on a year and a half of time invested and calls invested and drives to another state to get the wood in Utah from Cedar Mountain, Ponderosa Pine, and all this kind of stuff. But it certainly has been fun, and it's like part of just like a bucket list thing. Now, if, you know, turns out that a lot of people need some tiki masks, well, then I'll do what I can to supply as many as I can. But yeah, this is not going to become, you know, my full-time gig. Trader Justin's Tiki Tyler's Tikis. Oh, that's so funny. We should all start calling Tyler Tiki Tyler. We should start calling Spike Tiki Spike. I don't think he would like it for some reason. I somehow get the feeling that Spike wouldn't like being called Tiki Spike. Huh. Maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, here we go. My tiki, one last time. my Tiki men one last time. And now I have got to head out of here. I've got to head to Oceanic Arts, which, as far as I know, when you see this video, will be open for at least one more Thursday, and they're working on stuff over there. You should follow Schmaltzland Creations if we're speaking of Instagram. That's Leroy's son, Chris, and his wife Marla. Super sweet people, and they have their own whole art business and their whole own thing they do. Chris is an incredible painter, and they have been posting a lot of updates about the Oceanic Arts because they're down there running the very last clear out the warehouse and whatever stuff. So I am taking this down there, which is another thing I carved. I had this idea actually while Leroy was still alive. I did the sketch, and then I never finished it, and then I just got motivated recently hanging out with them so much to do this. So I'm kind of closing out my time at OA also. So that warehouse is getting pretty empty, but I wanted to drop this off for Chris, and so I'm headed away now. All right, so I have come back to Oceanic Arts. Look at that, the big moai is gone and sold. A lot of the old tikis that were in here, gone and sold. Well, all of them now. And I have delivered my Leroy head to his son, Chris. It's weird being here, man. Part of me wants to be like, I gotta stop coming here. It's too heartbreaking. But another part of me just loves coming to see Bob and hang out with the Schmaltz family. There's still some stuff in here, a lot of industrial stuff. Look at the pile. This guy got a great pile. That's mine. I bought that. There's all these umbrella covers and stuff in here. Still some tools and crazy stuff going on. Mostly I'm walking you through because they'll be open for a couple more Thursdays. Maybe by the time you see this, they will finally have closed or sold the warehouse. Who knows? But if you do see this in time, I think they're open on Thursdays. But I mostly just wanted to kind of come and walk through because now I've got this additional set of memories. When I first came in here during this, when they're trying to clear out the warehouse, it was kind of sad. I'm like, I don't want to remember OA this way. But now I do kind of want to remember OA this way. So I had so much fun hanging out with the Schmaltzes and checking out all the stuff, seeing all the crazy characters. Oh yeah, look at this. We figured this out earlier. Look at this blueprint cabinet right here that they have. Oh cool, a blueprint cabinet. And there's all these jobs on here of where they kept the blueprints, including the Polynesian Village, SeaWorld in Florida, and there's all these beachcomber restaurants. So there's still some really rad, weird stuff to find that is big and unusual. Look at these weird fiberglass patterns for making fiberglass thatch walls. There's still a bunch of stuff that Leroy painted in here, although I think some of the bigger items that you're seeing even are sold. But lots of wood, and they're pulling stuff out of the library, old reference magazines and neat stuff. Here's a piece that's already sold, just a piece of painted background from Leroy. So anyway, the whole point is, the whole moral of my tale today, the moral of the story is, like I said, I thought that all I could ever make, and all I ever would make, was a mess, trouble, you know, a fool of myself. And if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish surprising things. Not everything, you know. I wanted to be a rock and roll hero back in the day. Wanted to be in my band and tour the world. That never happened. And then I changed up the dream because, you know, you can't do the same thing over and over and expect different results forever. So sometimes it is good to change. Sometimes you think, well, I might want to be a vlogger or a TV guy or a painter, and you find out, well, I'm rubbish at that. But there still might be other things that you're great at that you just haven't discovered yet. And you know what, even if you're not great at it, like I'm not great at the tiki carving, stuff like that, but I'm having a lot of fun learning, having a lot of fun trying and creating. And when I walked in here, so I was like asking permission to sell the design, like, is it okay that we made a few of these and everything's cool? And they gave me the blessing. And not only that, they were like, you should have brought them here. You should buy your tiki things and then sold them here. I'm like, I think you guys have enough stuff that you need to get rid of without complicating it with my stuff. But that was pretty touching. It warmed the depths of my heart that my stuff was good enough. I could have sold it at Oceanic Arts to have the little seal of approval. That was so sweet. And they reposted my for sale thing on Instagram for me, which I thought was so cute too. So the wonderful Schmaltzes and everybody are clearing stuff out, pulling more stuff from the library, cleaning stuff off, dusting stuff off. Look, still a bunch of tools. I got a little pile going to magazines and rope. I think I'm gonna have to buy this. This is an old tape dispenser. This is like that brown moving tape stuff that you have to glue. This is an old tape dispenser. Look at how neat that is. How cool is that with a little Oceanic Arts stamped right on the side? Leroy's giant workbenches, but where would you keep that? Look at it next to human beings. Look at the size of that workbench. Carve giant stuff for Epcot, for the Polynesian Resort. I mean, if you have to carve a 20-foot sign, you have to have a pretty large table to do it on. Old cabinets from 20th Century Fox before they closed their original backlot from the paint and prop department. Some of Leroy's stain cabinets. There's a big old paint cabinet still here of Leroy's, which was awesome. Look at the size of that thing. If my garage wasn't so short, I would buy that. Unfortunately, it's just a little too tall. I know for a fact it's a little too tall for me. It's a little too big for me. It's too much paint cabinet for me. I'm not man enough for that paint cabinet. All these display cases and tiki torches. So in one way, it is a little bit sad because you're thinking, oh, I remember when Leroy would just kind of come out of there and we'd have all these talks and me and Bob would look at all the tikis and I'd go browsing the tikis and it was probably right around here, this area here where the shelves were at that had the masks stacked up, and I'd come in and browse in those shelves and just to have them stacked up in those tiki masks that were all kind of similar to each other, but all finished slightly different, painted slightly different. That used to really get my imagination going, and I was inspired. Not just inspired my imagination over all those years, and then that led me to go film far-flung destinations and theme park stuff and get interested in, you know, more of who made the things that I'm enjoying at these theme parks or these attractions. But it has now inspired me not just to try carving, but to go all the way with it, do some carvings. And Leroy was always like, when are you gonna carve a tiki? And actually the big tiki earlier, I was shamed into because I came out here. I was showing Leroy pictures of the mask I carved one of the last times I ever saw him back in his workshop back there. And he was like, when are you gonna carve a big tiki? Oh, I don't know, like, carve a big one. It's like no difference. You cut away everything that's not the tiki. Now, in fewer words than that, a lot of little grunts and noises in between, you know, true Leroy style. I'm really grateful that I got to come here and make videos throughout the years. Did a lot of sometimes vlogs in here and random videos. I'm still discovering videos where there's a weird part of the video where I came to Oceanic Arts for something, but it's not titled that or anything. So I keep stumbling across different stuff from here. So it's kind of fun commiserating with people and going, oh, I remember this place the way it was. But it's also wonderful because the Schmaltzes are a wonderful family. I love coming and hugging Bob, and it's nice to come and walk around. So anyway, I came to pick up some stuff, and I don't know whether I'll ever be back in here again. So I just thought I'd run the camera for you guys in here one last time. Still some wonderful wooden stuff that Leroy painted. And they're still finding little knickknacks and paddywhacks, big old dust collection systems. This saw, I think, was Bob's grandpa's and then his dad's. And then they got it to use in Oceanic Arts in the 50s or whatever. And then Leroy built the space for it. So there's everything in here has a story. And since Bob is still here, he can tell you a lot of the story. You have schmaltzes everywhere that can tell you stories. And so many look at this cabinet. Yes, with the patented Leroy lock on there. How about that? The man was part artist, part inventor, a genius, and a nice fella. A man of faith and family and tikis. What are you gonna do? All right, so the moral of the story is kids and friends and fellows and buddies and kindred spirits, you never know what you're capable of when you try. And maybe right now isn't the right time to pull something off. So if you fail at something, which I failed at carving that tiki 22 years ago, just remember, just because you failed now doesn't mean you have to give up on the dream. Sometimes you put the dream aside for a while, you work on other dreams, you switch dreams. But it's okay to pick things back up. It's okay to try, and it's okay to fail. Because trust me, you saw those tikis I made earlier, and even I was looking at them for what I'm very rarely ever proud of myself. I was like, man, I'm proud of myself. I did something that I always wanted to do. But let me tell you, what you didn't see were all the ways that I learned how to not carve a tiki mask that came before that. So I'm still learning and trying stuff, and people are like, wow, you're so good at this or that. People have been giving me very nice and sweet compliments, but I'm good enough to know that I'm not great, and I'm not even that good yet. But I like learning, I like having fun, and that's what it's got to be about. People ask me for advice, like, oh, how do I start a YouTube channel? Or you've got this and this going, how do I do this and this? You have to do it primarily because you're passionate about something and because you love something. We all know people who get rich and famous, and there's plenty of people who are more successful than me at lots of the things that I do, who do it purely because they can do it, they're good at doing it, and they can make a profit, and that's what drives them. For me, my advice is always going to be maybe bad advice, business-wise or financially, but I really believe in doing something purely for the passion, get interested, get super passionate about it, and then, you know, maybe one of those ideas will go. Maybe it'll become something. That's what Bob and Leroy. Leroy was an artist, a painter. Bob went to get a business degree, and they somehow, in 1956, started carving palm frond masks, and went, well, maybe we can carve a tiki, get a big old log down in the riverbed and carve it. And then for 66 years, stayed in business, creating all kinds of fantasy worlds, everything from SeaWorld to tiki jungle attractions to Norway Vikings in Epcot to just so many Western towns they probably worked on, and signs. You still drive around Whittier and see signs like this everywhere. Look at that. For steakhouses and welcome to Whittier and churches and all kinds of things that they worked on. So you have to do other things that are gonna keep the lights on and stuff, but make a little room for the passion projects. You can do surprising things. And you know, I didn't even believe in myself, and I managed to pull it off. And I believe in you. You can do it. All right, that's the moral of the story, and that's what I'm gonna leave you with, because I'm just getting overwhelmed and a little emotional walking around here. Say goodbye to Rudy, the old Christmas elk. You've done your duty, Rudy. I'm gonna get my pile right now, and then I'm gonna go home and sleep well. See you next time.